All right, so well, I guess it's 1 o'clock here, so we'll get started. Thank you all for joining us here on our first day of our webinar week, and maybe webinar month as well, as we've gotten really good responses from everyone. We're hoping to do as many of these as we can, just to spread some knowledge of ARM and get the word out, and kind of take advantage of maybe some extra cooped up time as people are transitioning and working remotely. I'm working remotely today as well, in my house, so we thought this is a good time for people to maybe brush up on some ARM topics. So that was kind of our thought today too. Then let's start off with how to move computers. We definitely had kind of an influx in our support mailbox in the last week and a half, as people are moving computers and getting ready to work remotely. So how do I get it from my desktop to my laptop, or things like that? So that was kind of the goal today, kind of show that process. If you are moving new computers, it's kind of good to know anyway, because eventually you'll probably get a new computer, even if you were already kind of set up remotely. So good to know just how to do it. It's a fairly easy process, but there's some features you can take advantage of to kind of enhance what you bring across to start instead of totally from scratch. Pick up kind of where you left off on your ARM. And then we'll also kind of discuss the ARM backup. Kind of goes hand in hand with moving computers over and really making sure that you're utilizing that pretty important feature to protect data. So. And I think everyone should be muted by default when you join the meeting. But if you do have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and holler in if I'm moving too fast, or you have a question on something we cover. It's really great to have some communication back and forth if there is something that you want to learn more about, or that I need to clarify. So. All right. So with that, I'll first kind of cover the migration package. Essentially, when you're moving your ARM from a computer you've already got ARM all installed, you've been working with it for however long, then when it's time to get a new computer, there's some things that you can bring across. So you're not starting totally from scratch when you get a new computer. What we can do is we call it a migration package that you would build. And essentially, ARM will package up pretty much anything that you've customized within your ARM since you first installed it on that computer. So your personal lists, all of your product lists that you have on the treatments editor, or your list of contacts, kind of any of those lists that you build up in an ARM study. We can grab all of those, all of your report sets, your editor views, things like that you've kind of created within ARM. We can bring those all together and put them in a single file that we call that migration package, and move that over to your new computer as well. So you're not starting from ground zero with a bunch of empty lists when you install your ARM. So that's where I'm going to start today. So when you're kind of at that point where you're ready to move over, it's under the Utilities menu at the top here. And we are going to migrate studies and settings to a new computer. By default, if you have a backup path specified, which I did, then ARM will save this migration package to your backup. And so you see here at the bottom, it says that I've got it on my D drive. It'll put it in that backup path. If you haven't yet set a backup path, then ARM will prompt you first and say, okay, where should I save this migration package? Probably pretty handy to grab a USB thumb drive or something to put in your computer. Something that's easy to move off of this computer to bring it to your new computer then when we're ready to move. We'll cover the backup in a little more detail later on as well of where you set that. So then really the second step then, we're already launched to, which pieces do you want to migrate? By default, ARM will bring across your settings. So this is kind of your option files. So when you're in like tools, options, you have all those different tabs. those will be included automatically. They're really, really tiny files and hidden pretty well as far as going out to browse to them. They're kind of stashed just so ARM uses them. So those are included by default. But you do have a couple more options on what you would want to bring over. And so the second one here, that personalization of study definition files, this is the big one that we talked about. That's your product lists, that's your contacts, that's your SEs, that's your views, all of those things that you build in ARM that really it's related to the study definition files. Really, all of those are time-consuming to start over from scratch. So we really wanted to have a tool to bring those things over. You certainly could, if you know kind of where some of those files are stored, you could go and hunt and peck and find those files and just bring them over yourself, but that's a lot of extra work and probably not very easy to do. So let's have ARM kind of automate that and bring that across. So that's definitely a recommended option to choose, and that will go across multiple study definitions. So if you do work with some of the large corporate customizations, you'll get a separate one for each of those. So if you have some lists or customizations in each of those, I should say personalizations within those customizations, then that'll be really helpful to bring all of those across in this one process. The third option here is the study data files. Really, to choose this one, I would really think, where are my files at? Thinking about your trials and your protocols that you work with. Where are those at that I work with? If they are on this computer that I'm looking at, on my hard drive, then I would recommend bringing those across, unless you had kind of hand copied them already to the new computer. But ARM can certainly go out and find all of the files in your study list and copy those into this package, and then when you bring it to the new computer, it can copy those data files to the hard drive of that new computer, and kind of transition it that way. If your data files are on like a network drive or like a cloud drive like Dropbox or OneDrive, then you really wouldn't need to copy them anywhere, because chances are all you would have to do on that new computer is hook up to that drive. Connect to the network or install your Dropbox, and those files will be copied there automatically already. So you really don't need ARM to do that. So probably most often you wouldn't really need to bring across the study data files, again, unless you really had your studies on your hard drive, like in your documents folder or saved to your desktop or something like that. All right, so then when you're ready and you want to bring across, we'll click OK. You can see in the corner, it'll just bear it. It'll load it here, and you can see I have a couple of customizations on my computer, so it's going to load one for each of those customizations, as well as the standard screens. All right, and then we just kind of get a summary. Hopefully you see all green. That'll be a good sign that everything worked. If you see some yellow or some red, then you might want to read in and look to see if there was some sort of error that happened, but we got all green here, and it just kind of gives us some instructions on what to do next. So we can just see that, yep, we had all of our customization folders got added, and our settings were included too. So that is just, I'll bring my drive over here. That's just on my SD card. Here's where I had my backup. So you'll just find that out that path, and we've got all of these files here are part of the migration package. And I don't have to do anything with those individually. Just bring this whole folder across. If I was moving to a new computer, I would just take out this SD card from the old one, and we can move it on to the new one. And then when we load up ARM, we can load in that package. So then when you are ready to make that final move, okay, so today's last day, I'm ready to move to the new computer, then what you would do here to kind of turn off the ARM on this old computer is we perform a deactivation. and you can do that from the help menu, and you deactivate this ARM. So essentially what this is going to do is say I'm unlinking this computer from my serial number, and the ARM will not necessarily uninstall, but it'll be kind of just running in a read-only mode. So we kind of call it an unlicensed mode. You can certainly still open files, but you won't be able to edit them if your ARM is not activated. So here when we deactivate, first it's going to prompt us. We added this recently just to help people if they didn't realize you could create a migration package. We wanted people to become more aware of that. So here's just a prompt to say, hey, this is a possibility. You should create a migration package. Since we just did that, we can just say no, because we already handled that step. And then here's just kind of a last confirmation. We're going to deactivate my license serial number from this computer. And so you're going to get this unlicensed version on this machine. And then on my new computer, we can install ARM, and it'll activate that first time I log in. It'll activate with my license, and that'll be where I can really use my ARM again. Today, I don't have kind of a second computer to hop onto, so we'll just kind of skip that here. But that's really where you would go to say, okay, I'm all done editing and using my ARM here, and let's move to the new one. When you are on your new computer, if you have the last email that we sent you with your activation, your maintenance, I should say, you can use the link in there to run check for updates and install ARM. Otherwise, you can feel free, if I just pop up our homepage here, you can also just go out to our website, and we have a button here on the left in the quick links to download ARM. So you can just snag that link there, and the download will run the check for updates. The transfer ARM will load up a PDF, pretty much following exactly what we did here today. So there's steps. We have a nice write-up in case you forget some of the steps on what you want to do here. So you just have to run that download, and that really does just run our check for updates program. You log in, and you are good to go then with installing the program here. I've got a question here. Yeah, so that's a great question. Here, actually, I can put it out here. What do we do if the old computer is crashed? So certainly, you probably don't plan to have an old computer crash, so you didn't have time to deactivate. So that's a great question. What you should do is email your GDM representative, and they can help you deactivate remotely. So we just go onto our activation server. As long as you provide your ARM serial number of that license, we can go into the activation server and deactivate that remotely. And then we'll just send you an email back, say that's all done, and then you're good to go with that new computer to download and activate. So that's a common question, and certainly one that can be handled pretty quickly. It's kind of nice. We can just do that remotely, and it's all online, so it's pretty much instant when we are able to log in and make that change. And it's actually a really good it's a really good segue into our second portion with the backup. Because obviously then if your computer crashes, you didn't have all this planning to bring things across. And part of the feature of your ARM backup is that it will automatically create one of these migration packages for you when you close down ARM each day. And so that way, if your computer does crash, you didn't have time to make a migration package, your backup path will actually have one. So it will have all of your lists, all of your SEs, report sets saved for you on that backup as well. So you don't have to start from scratch in that scenario either. So then just to finish out that process on that new computer is that you would simply install your ARM, and the very first time that you log into ARM, it will prompt to activate. And you may recall that when you first installed ARM on your computer, and it's just as simple as that. Then there is a question that very first time if you want to load a migration package. If you don't see that prompt or forget about it, you can simply load that migration package. It's under the utilities, excuse me, the utilities menu. load migration package. And so here it's just going to ask, okay, where have you saved that package? And here, so I would just choose my D drive, and I can choose that the ARM backup folder, kind of whatever folder you save the package to. You don't have to pick the individual files. ARM will know which ones are the backup, the migration package itself. And then you do have the option to select which components to load. So if you try to load them all and something went wrong, and part of it did, but part of it didn't work, you could always come back and try to load it again and just choose one of them. Here in this case, I don't need my study data because I didn't include those in the package anyway. So I just want to bring across my settings and my lists. We'll just say okay, and we'll just see basically it's doing kind of the opposite of what we had just done. It's going to unpackage all of those files that were saved to that migration package, and it's going to copy them then onto this computer. And then it's going to run my updates here to make sure that any of the definitions, any of those customizations that we have installed, make sure all of those files are up to date since we are bringing in some of the lists and things. So this might take some time, so I might just kill that off before we get too far. We don't really have to wait for all of that. It looks like I'm a little out of date on some of mine, but it would run them all through kind of anyway. So I'll let this run and then kill off the check for updates. So we don't have to wait for all of those to go. But essentially, it'll just kind of automatically run any of those customizations. And then once those are all finished updating, it'll bring us back to our ARM and just kind of give us a summary again of what it's brought in. And so here's that summary since I closed off our updater. And again, green is good. That means everything was loaded in correctly. If there was some problems, you'd see some yellow or some red, and either it'll try to kind of help you explain what went wrong. If you had questions, you can always contact us, and we can kind of help you through what might have been going wrong. But, all right, so that's just kind of the down and dirty of moving to a new computer. I guess if there's any questions, whether right now or it's kind of one of those that you don't worry about it too much until you're in that process. And so certainly we're here to kind of walk you through that if you do get stuck when you are actually moving computers around. So my second topic today to cover, since they are pretty closely tied and we've alluded to it a couple times already, is the backup. And so really there's some features in ARM that will try to protect your data. And a lot of times we'll hear people say, well, that's great. I'll kind of give them the rundown, and they say, well, but my IT runs a backup every night, and so I don't know if I really need this as well. But really what the backup is going to provide you is a history of files. And so it'll each time you save a file, when you press that save button when you're in a trial or in a protocol, then ARM will save a copy of that to the backup device. And so as you're pressing save and making changes through the season, you'll have, each time you were saving that, you'll have that version saved in the backup. So then what you can do is you can view that whole history. So if you say you went into a file and you entered some data, and then you realize, oh no, that was the wrong file. I didn't want to do that, but I already saved. Or maybe somebody else had done that, and you're trying to kind of pick up the pieces. You could go to that backup and view the previous history and roll back to the day before. And so then you don't have to find everything that was hand entered. You can just roll back to that last version. Something that's a little more common that we see in our support box from time to time is files getting corrupted. I kind of wonder if it isn't if you have a network path or a cloud drive where you're syncing online, and when you save, if maybe your internet blips out just at the wrong time, some wires get crossed and the file gets corrupted when it's being saved to the cloud or even just saved on your hard drive. And so then when you come back to open that file the next day, you get some crazy message, ARM can't read the file or something like that. A lot of times it's a little hard to figure out what's wrong within the file itself. It's a lot easier just to go to your backup and restore the previous day's version before the corruption happened, and then you're just out maybe that little bit of data that you had changed the day before or something. So that's kind of the most common times that we see having to use the backup. One of those features that, fingers crossed, you wouldn't have to use ever, but it's really good to have running in case something does go wrong. All right, so I have a question here. If there's any possibility to revert to the old version of the data, and so yeah, that's kind of exactly what that previous versions helps you with, is that you really, if you make any changes, as you're making changes, you're having that history be saved, and you'll see the list. And so yeah, you could certainly just go back to the way the data was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, or just yesterday. You'll be able to kind of pick and choose those, and you'll be able to actually see, and you can view the backup, or you can restore it. So you can just make sure and take a look at the file without actually using that version either. So to set a backup, we mentioned it briefly. It's under the Tools menu and in your Options, and then on the File tab. So here's kind of all the different paths that the ARM uses. But the second one here is the backup. And so this is how you would link a backup drive. And you simply browse to pick a path for where you would want the backup. And probably the number one thing is you want your backup on a different drive than where your files are saved. So, if you were saving all of your study files on your local hard drive, then for sure you would want to get a separate drive to save your backup to. So if your hard drive crashes, then your regular data might be gone, but now your backup files are somewhere else and they are safe, and they didn't get ruined as well with that crash. So it's really important just to make this path somewhere different from where your files are at. It's a little less important if you're on a network. IT probably has backups running, or if you're on the cloud drive type of thing, then there's a little bit less of a concern of that crash and losing your data files themselves. So you could get away with the backup being on a local drive in that case. But it's just really important to make sure that it's somewhere separate from your files. So if something happens to the files, your backup lives in a new spot. Just kind of slide here, really just more for the picture than anything. These are kind of the two items that we recommend, really. So today on my computer, I've got an SD card. They're really nice. They're the size of your fingernail, maybe a little bit bigger. But if you have that port in your computer, it just slides right in. It doesn't stick out at all. You really don't even think about it, and that's kind of the best thing for a backup is something that you are always connected to, and you don't have to think about. Don't have to take it out. Don't have to put it in. It's just always there. If your computer doesn't have an SD card slot, then we have found that they make these low-profile USBs, so it barely sticks out. It sticks out just a little bit, but not very much. So that way it doesn't snag as if it's like a laptop and you're putting it in a computer bag. It won't get snagged and rip off or anything like that. It's really close to your computer. So that would be another option. If the SD card doesn't work. Really the big thing is just separate drive that's always connected. So that way, if you're traveling or in a different location, you still will have a backup as you're making changes, at least to your files. You want that drive connected when you're saving it. Size, you really don't need a whole lot of size. We said 8 gigabytes. I think that's plenty. A lot of the ones when we're at in-person training, sometimes we like to have some on hand to give to people. And I don't know, that the most cost-effective ones for us are like 32 gigabytes. You know, at this point, space is so cheap that it's really hard to might even be hard to find an 8 gigabyte at this point. I'm not sure, but really the a trial file and a protocol file, they're pretty small as they are. The backup itself actually compresses those files even further, so you can have years and years and years of data and backup, and it's not even going to get close to that 8 gigabyte of space. So space isn't usually too big of a concern there. And it's pretty cheap, so you may as well just make sure to have enough, and then especially if you happen to use that drive for saving pictures or something else to it, that you have some space. So once you connect that drive up to your computer, then the trick is just to go to those tools, options, and then on the file tab, give it that path. And so if you choose that path, you don't have to create that folder, because actually ARM will offer to. So here I just chose my D drive. I want to say okay. It's going to ask, oh, hey, I'll create this folder for you called ARM backup. That way we know that all of those files are in the separate folder. They won't get intermingled with any of your regular files. And so it offers to in this case, it's just going to make that path since I already have that folder there. But if it was a totally new drive, it would create that folder for me. So. All right, so I'm just going to open up a trial here. Looks like I already have it open in a different window. Maybe I'll open a different one here. I'll just grab a tutorial file. I don't think the tutorial files themselves save the previous versions, so I'm just going to quickly copy one over here to my to kind of a regular folder, just to fake it a little bit. Really just to demonstrate here, I want to kind of demonstrate how we'll have the previous versions set up. And really, it's kind of one of those things where just as you're working on your files, you'll just save them like normal, and it really won't be a big deal. And but here I just kind of want to create an example, so we can see what the previous versions would look like. Here I'm just going to go to my fungicide 2018 example here. All right. So I'll just pretend that I'm entering some data or something. It doesn't really matter what change you make to the file. Whatever you're doing to your file, the key is when we press save. And so I'm going to press save here, and we'll look in the corner. So this is kind of that red text there is just kind of going to explain what ARM is doing when it's thinking, and it'll actually say that's going to be saving a backup. So validates, saves the trial, and has going to save that version then also to my backup drive. So now when I click this X, I'm going to close this trial. I'm going to keep my ARM open. And the interface for seeing your history list of your files, that is on the study list. And so the study list is that main screen you see when you open up ARM without a file being opened. Kyle's gonna cover that here. I think on Wednesday to learn how to use this in more depth. But here it's really just that list of all of your trials and protocols you've been working on. And so if you right click on one of your studies, at the bottom there, it's previous versions. And so here you can see that I've actually worked on this file a few different times. And so each time that I pressed save on that file, it created a previous version, and it timestamps it for me so I can see exactly when it is I was in there and saved it. And here's the last save version. So what we did just a minute ago, it saved it to the backup. So here now, if we had to roll back and we wanted to see what we had done the last time, You just select whichever date stamp you have there, and you can view. And it's just going to go to the backup, and it's going to open that just as read only. So we haven't done any action as far as utilizing this file. We're just going to open it up from the backup so we can take a look around. In that case where your file is corrupted, we'd be looking to make sure that we don't get any error message when we open it up. Or if we put in the wrong data, we can look to say, yep, this has the 13 that I wanted, and it didn't have those extra columns that I had added last week by mistake or something. So essentially, this is just kind of a way to check to see that this is the version we want. And so if that's the one we want, we can just simply click Restore. And it'll copy that file from the backup, and it'll place it where it is currently saved. In this case, it was on my hard drive. And so it'll make that version the last saved version instead. Basically restoring that from the backup to where you're actually editing the file. And then you can just go and open it like you normally would. And so actually he'll do that because we saw that this change here, I just changed some of the data in that first column. So if we restore this version, now when we close and open up the file, we'll see that those changes I had made to column 1 aren't going to be there any longer. So we still have all those zeros because that was the previous version was saved in that manner. So again, the biggest thing today, if you have time today to do it, get it set right away. If you've never set it up before, do the tools and then options, and go to the file tab and make sure to set the backup. Really no other action for you today. That's kind of the nice thing is it's just going to work in the background. It's not going to be something that you have to think about all the time. Get it set up the one time, and it'll be saving those previous versions. And then if you do run into some trouble, you need to fix a corrupted file or try to get the backup somehow, then you use the study list. And even at that point, you can always get a hold of us and contact your support person, and we can kind of help you through that process as well. But really, that's the biggest thing in all of the trainings we do is to get people to hook up a backup, because it really saves some uncomfortable conversations when the phone rings and somebody says, "Well, my hard drive crashed and I can't find my data." You just kind of just start sweating a bit for them even, and just hoping that they had a backup set. That was kind of the very beginning of the feature. Was a gentleman called and said that he had saved all of his files were on his computer. The hard drive crashed. Everything's gone. And so he was just calling to see what can we do to help? Is there anything that we can do? And we had to shrug our shoulders and say, there's really nothing ARM can do. ARM was gone as well, and so that gentleman had to email all of his sponsors and ask them to send back the last copy of the file that he had sent them in that year. So lots of uncomfortable position that person was in, and that was really our trigger after working through that. Was we need something to protect this data. And so it doesn't take long to set up from the start, and then hopefully you don't have to use it if everything goes well. But as long as you set it up today, then if something goes wrong, it'll be there for you. Thank you, Baron, for reminding me. There is an option right underneath this backup called backup interval. And so this actually, it is not like an automatic backup, but instead it sets the interval between saves that a backup will be created. So for example, I'm a compulsive saver. Every time I change a number or something, I like the shortcut Control S, because I'm always on my keyboard anyway, but I'm always pressing save. Just about every time I make a change, I'm pressing save. And so instead of having ARM create 200 backups in a day as I press save that many times as I'm working on a file, you can set this backup to be kind of how long in between ARM should save those backups. So in this case, I have it set to 60. So we had just saved this file a minute ago. If I made a change and press save, there would not be a new previous version created. It would wait until an hour has passed, wait until 60 minutes has passed, and then that next time that I press save, then it will trigger another backup. So it's kind of a way, if you're saving all the time and you don't need 100 different previous versions being created every day, you can set that interval. 60 might be a little bit much, depending on how much you're changing. It's just kind of up to you. Maybe you set it for 30, maybe 15, maybe 2 hours. If you don't want too many created, it's really up to you. I think the default is 60, but you can really change that if you want those versions to be saved a little more frequently. So, but thanks for noticing that. That one's one that it sounds slightly different, I think, than what we necessarily intend. That's not an automatic backup, but really just a way to prevent from too many previous versions being created, just with kind of incessant saving or anything like that. So. Another question here says, when my study data is saved directly on OneDrive, or really any cloud service like Dropbox or something, is the backup still useful? And so yeah, in that case, when your data is saved to the cloud, that situation where, oh my gosh, all my files are gone, I need help, probably not going to occur, since you have the data in the cloud. But the file corruption is definitely something that we've seen more often in the last couple of years, where you open up a file and ARM says, I can't read this file, or there's missing sections, and there's nothing in assessment data or something like that. And my suspicion is that's coming from that connection with the cloud, that when ARM saves the file, then it's immediately being synced out to the cloud. Well, if something goes wrong with your internet connection at just the wrong time, a packet gets lost or something, and that file doesn't quite get saved right, then it can be corrupted. So that's really where the backup shines, then, just to be able to go back just on one file and go back to the previous version. So you can roll back to the yesterday, or the last time that you had kind of a successful save, essentially. That can be really helpful. One more question here, the backup. Let me just show that backup interval again. So essentially, this is just how often to save a backup in a single file. So it won't automatically create another backup for you, and it doesn't create a backup of all of your files at once. So ARM doesn't systematically find all of your files and save a new version to the backup. Instead, really, it's kind of a file by file basis. So once you open up a study and you make a change and you press that save button, then that's when the backup will be triggered. And so this interval will basically set, if I continue to press save again. So for example, we made that change and we press save. Then as we make additional changes and edit the file, this next time I press save, we won't have a new previous version set because we haven't exceeded that interval of 60 minutes. So we'll still save it, and ARM saves the file just fine, just nothing happens with the backup yet. And so I can continue working with this file and until 60 minutes, so an hour from now, if I'm saving it at 3 o'clock, then I press save, then there'll be a new version, because ARM will check and say, well, the last time I saved a backup was about 1:30, so it's been 60 minutes, so now I'll save another backup, really specifically just for this file. There's not an auto backup feature yet that we have. So. I do want to point out one other portion of that backup that I alluded to earlier, and kind of ties why we talked about both of these features together, is that when you close down ARM for kind of the last time on the day, or if you have multiple windows, kind of that last window that you close down, then it will save a migration package to your backup. So all of the perks that we talked about with why you would want to create a migration package, all of that gets done automatically for you. Kind of with that very same thought of what happens when my computer crashes. I didn't plan for my computer to crash, so I wasn't ready to migrate. If you have the backup set, you will have all of your product lists, all of your report sets, all of those personalizations that you've done in ARM, all of those will be saved in your backup. So in that scenario, you simply just remove that SD card or whatever backup path that you chose, bring that over to your new computer. You can install your ARM and then just go back to the utilities and load migration package. And even though you didn't specifically create the migration package, browse out to that ARM backup location that you have, and it can load in that migration package that was created for you automatically. And so that's a way to recover all of those product lists and personalizations that you have. So that can be a big time saver, that you're not starting from scratch with all of your lists and your settings and things like that. Even if you didn't plan to move and you didn't create that migration package to move, but you were forced with a crash, that the backup will be there for you to do that. So it would be another good reason to have that backup on a separate drive instead of on your hard drive. So that way you can move it to a new computer if something does happen to your ARM computer. It's easy to move it over. So. Another question, do you need to back up for all different ARM files separately? Or if you do this once, it makes a backup of all your files. So there is not a batch backup. So really, when you turn on the backup path, so if you go ahead and do that today, this is the first time, you've never used it before, tools, options, and you set the backup, it'll start building from today with the files that you use today. So essentially, if I had never done any backup yet, my backup folder would remain empty at this point. And then once I open up a trial or a protocol or create a new one, when I press save, then it'll save just that file to the backup. So there isn't necessarily like a building of the backup that the ARM would do, but instead just kind of the files that you would save. Then it starts to create that history as you're saving them. If you had a bunch of files and you kind of just wanted to save them as a backup in general, it might not be a bad idea to do that. Just make a copy and put it into that backup folder. But that would not be in the ARM backup system itself, but just be kind of a regular hand backup that you would do. But the key is there that it really isn't going to start to back up everything all at once, but it's really just the files that you open and the files that you save. It'll just do them one at a time as you're saving them. The backup continues to build. And then one other note from Mary as well, thank you, that when you're moving computers, we had done that deactivation step. And I didn't point it out when we saw that dialog, but it does list how many deactivations. So a license typically would have one activation. You run your license on one computer at a time. And each year you have two deactivations, we call them, essentially transfers. By default. So we just kind of guess that would be kind of a standard amount. Maybe if you had to move your computer once or twice a year would seem to be a typical rate. And so by default, you'll see there would be two deactivations allowed. Those are flexible. So if you're having computer problems and you had really bad luck, or you move computers and then you had to get a new one and stuff like that, and you find out that you're out of deactivations, just email your rep, and we can go into that portal and add a couple more. Really, the goal was just to not provide unlimited deactivation, so people can just move everywhere and get ARM on as many computers as they wanted. So we had that, just picked a number, but certainly if you need more, just contact us, because you need to transfer it to a new computer. We can help with that. So. All right, really great questions. I guess I'll just kind of open it if anyone else has questions on this topic, or certainly let them fly, or if you think of them later, you can get a hold of us, and we can kind of help you. Biggest thing, if there's one thing you take away from today, is go in and get your backup set. And we can always help you if you do get to a point where you need to leverage the previous versions, or know how to move things over. Definitely get a hold of us. But we can't do much with the backup. If you don't have the backup set, then if your computer crashes, there's not much we can do. So get that set, and then we can always help you with the smaller details when you're at that point. But it's real important, and really good thing to do is get that backup running, so you have your files being backed up, and then also have that migration package, all of those things that you do within ARM, all of your lists and things to be saved, so you don't lose them, because that's a big pain. If those disappear, just to have to rebuild from scratch again is not a lot of fun. So we want to make sure there was ways to do that. So I guess there was one other question here about, maybe not specifically about a migration package. It's a kind of a common one, though, that we do see if you're opening up a file and there's a warning about a protocol ID. So in this case, he says he's using an old file to create a new protocol, and it warns you that you have the same protocol ID. Not necessarily here. I'll just open up a trial. Should be pretty similar in the protocol. Really, what ARM is doing is, in your header, you have a trial ID or a protocol ID, depending on the type of file, and it's trying to prevent you from creating duplicates. So what you would want to do if you're just trying to create a new protocol is change that protocol ID, and then save it. And now it'll know it's a new ID because it's a new year or a new file, and then you're good to go. So hopefully that would help if you just adjust your ID, so that way each file that you have has a unique either protocol ID or trial ID, depending on the trial type. So. All right. Well, unless anyone else had questions, I think that about wraps today's session up. Hopefully you saw we've got kind of a whole week lined up, and we had really great response. So actually we had to kind of close the registration because we filled up. We kind of capped at 100 in this virtual webinar that we have. So we kind of actually had to close the registration. So if you know somebody who wanted again but couldn't, we plan to kind of probably repeat some of these topics here in the future as well, to run some more of them. And if you have some ideas for webinars in the future you'd want to see, we certainly appreciate that feedback. And actually, I have a webpage. I'll probably include a link in an email once we save this recording and get those recordings out. I'll include a link as well to some feedback. So if you want to give us some ideas or let us know if there was some things we could improve on, it's great to hear. So. Yeah, so we appreciate your time, and glad that you guys could join us, and hopefully we'll be able to talk at you some more throughout the week and in the future. So thanks, everybody.